Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. Matthew Hagum here. I am back again with you for another Lyceum. I think this is, no, wait, this is our last Lyceum. Well, our last Lyceum. We have a social forum coming up this month. So we're wrapping up the programming for 2023. I can't believe it's almost 2024. It's been a very busy season for us. As many of you know, we just launched over at the Accounting Alchemy number. My tongue's a little tied today. The Accounting Alchemy Network, our playbook. So if you haven't seen that video yet, please go watch the replay. We put a ton of work into that, particularly for those of you who are new members and new to the work that the AAN does. That's going to be your go-to resource for how to dive in and understand how you can start making a difference right away. But for those of you who are watching this video for the first time, and this is the first time you're hearing about the AAN, whether you're watching it on YouTube or you're finding this in your social feed, let me tell you a little bit about who we are. The Accounting Alchemy Network is a community of accounting professionals who are a stand for a better future. We are here as a community, in essence, to support you and ultimately in empowering accountants to transform the world. We have really amazing programming with organizations like the Pachamama Alliance, where we educate people on climate action and social justice issues so that you can understand how you, as an accounting professional, can make a difference in your life, in the life of your clients, and in the impact that those businesses have on the communities at large. So we are here for another Lyceum. I'm really excited about this topic. There is such a thing as a unit chicken, which I hope we do talk about that at some point in our adventure today. And so I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Ingrid Edstrom, who's going to introduce herself and then introduce our guest. Over to you, Ingrid.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Yes, Ingrid Edstrom, co-founder of the Accounting Alchemy Network. And I'm really excited to welcome Melanie to our conversation today to talk about post-growth entrepreneurship. I first learned about you, Melanie, through the Post-Growth Institute, and got to watch one of your amazing courses on YouTube, which I'm just mind blown that these courses are just available on YouTube, and would love to draw more attention to the amazing, amazing things that you're teaching around post-growth entrepreneurship. So because there's so much that we get to dive into in our time together today, I want to cut right to the chase. Would you give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself and nonprofit ventures? And then we can start talking about, what does post-growth mean for any of our audience members who maybe aren't as familiar with those terms as you and I might be?
Sure. So my name is Melanie Rieback, and I am, I've got a few hats, but I'm the CEO and co-founder of Radically Open Security. I'm also the CEO and co-founder of Nonprofit Ventures. And I specialize in not-for-profit, non-extractive business. So sounds a bit unusual. It is. And of course, I do indeed focus on things like post-growth, degrowth, donut economics. I am indeed a fellow of the Post-Growth Institute. So, and that's also been quite nice. And for the rest, I think that part of applying post-growth to business is really just starting with the most basic and fundamental of questions, such as, is growth good? Right. And I would say, in the way that we usually frame things, we take for granted, that our company needs to grow. But how does it need to grow? How much does it need to grow, right? If we also consider the finance industry, I mean, same thing, right? I mean, we always need to make those returns on our investments. And of course, talking to any portfolio manager about anything besides growth, leads to, worry and negativity. And also I think for accounting professionals, we're also just, I think you also are trying to make sure that, that the numbers are all accounted for and moving in the right directions. And, our objective also is just to make sure that, the numbers are going up and to the right. And it's just a different way of thinking about it, right? Because when you start asking the question, well, why actually do we always have to grow? Why is it with, for example, GDP, gross domestic product, in countries that it always needs to grow? The answer that most macroeconomists like Kate Raworth or Tim Jackson will give you is, well, we need to keep growing because there's so much financial extraction happening from our economies that we need growth just to maintain a steady state. And that's really what the thing is, because the problem with growth, of course, is that it puts pressure on our societies and also on our planet. And we know by now that this isn't sustainable. So what we really need to do is start asking questions like, rather than growing, how can we thrive, right? And how can we actually create an economy that rather than just up and to the right, instead it can just flatten and things can be okay, and we can still thrive from this standpoint. And if we can eliminate the financial extraction from the economy, then we can actually maintain that steady state and be okay. So that's the whole idea of implementing a post-growth economy. But of course, an economy is a meta concept, and an economy consists of various actors like businesses, but also consumers and governments and educational institutions. And, all of us collectively, we form the economy. But then how can we be able to create a post-growth economy if we don't understand what it means to create a post-growth business, right? It's the same thing also with degrowth. I mean, with degrowth, we also have, sort of vague understanding that maybe we're supposed to reduce the amount of consumption, but what would it actually mean to create a degrowth business? It sounds like a contradiction in terms, but it doesn't have to be. Post-growth and degrowth actually are really quite similar. And in both cases, it's trying to eliminate the growth imperative, and really to enable a situation that if we're stable, if we're steady state, or, God forbid, if we're, if the economy is going down, that things will be okay. And this is not just some kind of weird, progressive left woke idea. I mean, how can we thrive if the economy isn't growing? I mean, it just so happens quite frequently that we're in a recession. So it's not a hypothetical. I mean, we need to actually understand how we can be in recessionary conditions and still thrive. Yeah. So, yeah.
So what you're describing is a pretty big paradigm shift for most people in our society who have grown up with this is just how it is kind of mentality around our economy, that these are decisions that are outside of our ability within each of our own lives to make choices. And within your classes, you challenge that paradigm and demonstrate how individuals, particularly entrepreneurships who are leading businesses, can create these changes within our own lives. What does that look like in practice?
So in practice, trying to create a non-extractive business is an awful lot like running any other business, really. I mean, entrepreneurship is entrepreneurship, right? And it means that presumably you are selling something, a product or service of some kind. It means that ideally you have some customers who want to buy it. It means that you have daily operations that need to be taken care of. And if you do grow, if that becomes successful, then you have all the usual daily routine of just managing a team and keeping things going. But I think the big difference, though, is that it starts really with the governance structures. So if you're trying to create a financially non-extractive business, what this means is basically that you need asset locks in place to prevent anyone from pulling the financial value out of the company in excess of middle-class salaries and a pension. Now, the first thing that people would think when they hear some, not-for-profit business is they would think, oh, but like, do you not make money, or are you all volunteers, or do you give things away for free? No. We're social enterprises, and social enterprises tend to charge reasonably market conform rates for whatever product or service they're selling. And they also tend to pay market conform rates for the staff. It has to be that way, with social enterprises. Otherwise, how on earth could we survive in the market? So, so in that sense, and I'm also running such a company myself. It's called Radically Open Security, which is basically a not-for-profit, non-extractive cybersecurity company. And I like to say just because we're not-for-profit doesn't mean we're cheap. And we're not, because we sell cybersecurity audits from parties, from Google to the European Commission to the Dutch energy grid, to the largest supermarket chain in the Netherlands, to the Open Tech Fund in Washington, D.C., which is part of the U.S. government. We don't do that for free, nor would we. I mean, we have pretty high quality cybersecurity professionals. I mean, again, you don't get customers like Google for no reason, but of course they're worth a lot on the market. And if we don't pay them a good amount, then of course they're going to go and work for some other company. But what's different though is in the governance structure. The first thing is we are owned by a foundation. So 9 years ago, roughly, I sold Radically Open Security for €1 to a foundation. And then the question is, of course, why would you do this? I did this in part because I wanted the company to basically not have any shareholders. And basically by giving it to a foundation, what I was attempting to do was separate the profit motive of the business from the actual operational vehicle of the business itself. The second thing that I did with my company is I used a kind of obscure Dutch business model hack called a fiscal fundraising institution, which is a really odd thing from the Dutch church. And sometimes a church basically wants to do a commercial spinoff. It raises money somehow, and the money goes with a tax benefit back to the church again. So a famous example of this in the Netherlands is the Language Institute Regina Caeli, otherwise known as the Nuns of Vught. So the nuns started the Language Institute. The Language Institute is pretty good, like our Queen Maxima, who's originally from Argentina. She learned her Dutch there. And then the profits go back to the nuns. That's basically how the construction works. So we figured, you know what, we're going to make our so-called commercial spinoff a cybersecurity company, and then we're going to make our church the NLNet Foundation. And NLNet is a 30-year old funding agency that funds open source projects, digital rights initiatives, and anything for a better open internet. So anyone who's into tech might recognize the names of some of their beneficiaries: GNU, Tor, Jitsi, DNSSEC, WireGuard. Anyhow, but you guys are accountants, not techies. So suffice it to say that these are the kinds of technologies that the larger internet runs on, and also a lot of anonymity, technologies also to make sure that things can stay open and free. So anyhow, but the point is that this FFI construction forces us to donate 90% of our profits to charity. Yeah, and that's pretty extreme. I mean, the last 10% is our cash flow buffer, which we need to make payroll at the end of every month. And of course, then people would ask, well, how can you even run a company that way? How can you donate 90% of your profits and even still survive? The key is in understanding that we're talking about 90% of our profits and not 90% of our revenue. Because if it were 90% of our revenue, we could close the doors. But because it's our profits, then what it means is, first my customers pay me, then I pay all of my subcontractors who are actually doing the work. Then I also pay for my, overhead, which includes things like IT and infrastructure, our finance department, project management, report reviewers, business development, all of those costs that a business typically would have. I can also, if I need to, create a reserve if I know that there's a very large expenditure coming up in the next book year that I need to accommodate for. And then basically everything at that point that's left over that would otherwise be dividended out to shareholders, that's our profit. So 90% of that goes to NLNet, and then the last 10% goes towards the cash flow buffer. And that's how over the last almost 10 years now, we've managed to grow Radically Open Security to a 50-person cybersecurity company. We've had 150 customers, and we've donated approximately 800,000 euros to the NLNet Foundation.
Okay. Wow. So thank you for breaking that down, and very impressive. And I love how you I mean, you know, I think one of the things that comes up for me with this work is, you know, a lot of people will talk about it and then aren't sure how to practice it, and then aren't sure how to like practice it to the extent that they're achieving some of the results that you're talking about, like growing a team and subsequently generating profit that can be given back to charitable causes. And I guess I have some very functional questions for you, because it's awesome to have somebody who's actually doing this work inside of a business from an accountant's perspective. And you know, I guess I get curious about things like, okay, so you mentioned the compensation being a middle wage salary plus pension, right? And then immediately I was thinking, okay, well, how do you account for you know, the fact that we have team members, so I'm in the Pacific Northwest, right? In Seattle is one of the bigger cities. So what if we have an employee in Seattle and then an employee in Custer, Washington, where I live, which, you know, the cost of living is like, woo, like completely different, right? So, and yeah, I mean, yeah, I travel a lot. So, but the point is like, how do you account for the geographic variables that would ultimately indicate what a middle-class lifestyle looks like in those particular geographic regions? And that's sort of one curiosity. And then I think the other curiosity I have is, how do you account for the investment that an owner makes in a business? I know for myself, for example, I have personally gone into debt to get my business to the point that it is, and have accumulated a lot of costs and labor, and a lot of that is unpaid. And so I get curious about, because I think one of the issues that comes up often is paying CEOs too much money, right? And I am by definition the CEO of my own company, and so then I start to grapple with that from a ethical or moral perspective of like, okay, well, how much should I get paid for all this work I just did, and where's that parameter? So I'm curious about how you take into consideration factors like that, and then also, as the team grows, you know, you talk about giving to charitable causes. Do you have a mechanism in place for evaluating which cause gets the money if the needs of the team members or the perspectives of the team members are shifting? Yeah, so those are some of my curiosity. I have more, but we'll start with those ones and see where they take us.
All right, that's a lot of questions, so I'll try and remember all of them. Remind me at a certain point if I forget something. But your question about pay equity, it's a good question, and I think it's actually quite a fundamentally difficult question to rigorously answer anyhow. When I'm talking about market conform pay, let's put it this way: I'm not paying myself what is market conform for a cybersecurity CEO. That would be ridiculous. So, you know, so already, I mean, you know, and that does start, first of all, in terms of executive compensation, it starts begging the question of what is reasonable and proportional, and nobody agrees. You know, on the one hand, you know, in the Netherlands, we have a particular rule, or I would say guideline for pay equity that's called the Balkenende norm. So Jan Peter Balkenende is one of our former prime ministers. And basically, the Balkenende norm means you shouldn't get paid more than the prime minister of your country. So, which I think in this case was like 200,000-ish. Whether or not that is fair, I don't know. But it's certainly one way that you could interpret, you know, executive compensation equity. Another way that people interpret it is things like pay ratios. So, for example, you know, highest paid employee to the lowest paid employee. But then nobody agrees on the ratios, right? Because I mean, I think Elon Musk was like 40-1 or something like that, and I think that's not even counting his equity, of course. But you know, and then you have, I mean, I think Bernie Sanders said something like 8-1, but to be quite honest, even 8-1 sounds kind of excessive to me. You know, and I'm, you know, so then what about like 2-1? Is that okay? I mean, you know, and I just don't think that there's really an easy answer to that. I mean, honestly, I think even if it were 2-1, people in my company would be uncomfortable with that, especially given the fact that, well, I mean, I also work with ethical hackers that are also quite a rarity, and I have to say they're also paid quite a bit. So, I mean, honestly, my company couldn't even afford to pay me 2-1, given what they're being paid, because of course we also have to make the unit economics work. So that being said, for me personally, I mean, what you said about entrepreneurial risk is spot on, of course. I mean, the very first year when I started the company, I didn't earn a cent. I mean, that was sort of the entrepreneurial risk that I took. Year two, I was able to pay myself basically the statutory minimum for a director of a company in the Netherlands. That was roughly 40K ish, maybe a little bit more. At that point, year three, I paid myself back for year one. And then from year four onwards, I sort of started gradually increasing it to what I had earned back when I was an employee in the cybercrime team at ING Bank. Which was basically a bit above 100,000, which is basically what I would consider roughly a good middle class wage, as long as you're not living in the Bay Area or something. So, which
Yeah.
I'm not.
Well, thank
So,
you. And that actually does go, I think, into the latter question about sort of how you make decisions about charity. But I want to kind of tack onto that question a little bit, because what you're talking about here in the context of pay equity, and how the numbers get calculated, right, in sort of traditional capitalist businesses over here, right? People are keeping things secret, right? Not telling the left hand what the right hand is doing, not telling the upper management what lower workers are getting paid, or vice versa. They know they don't. Sort of a lot of secrecy, and in part that's to cover up the inequities, I think, right? Because there are some clear disparities there, but to have an environment where you stand for something different means that the environment that you're creating, the culture that you're creating, has a different set of values that guides the conversation around how you make decisions and share information. And so in the context of whether it's choosing what to do with your profit, or making any other decisions around how these calculations are formed, like how does that look inside it? Like is it a management meeting you have every week and you talk about, like, how does it actually unfold on a day-to-day for you?
Yeah, it's a very complex issue. And to be quite honest, I mean, it's the kind of issue that I want to make open and transparent, but there's some complications with that, and I'll explain why to you. So basically, we're not externally funded. We don't have venture capitalists. We're also not selling equity on the stock market or things like that, which basically means that we're not acting like a financial institution. It means that the only money that our company has coming in is the cash that we get from our customers. That's it. Now, ethical hackers, it's a pretty hot market. I mean, definitely, there's a lot more demand for ethical hackers than there is supply, which means that what we've got, and this is just very specific to our industry, is a number of extremely highly skilled, highly trained, oftentimes highly educated professionals that can pull down a lot on their own. This makes us, I think, different than a lot of other industries. We're not like, Uber Eats or something, So I do tend to work a lot with freelancers, but they're very highly paid freelancers. And what I can explain to you is that a senior level pen tester by themselves can probably easily pull down 150 euros an hour. And for the top ones, maybe more. So it's not quite lawyer rates. I mean, we're not like 300 or more, nothing like that. But the point is that we're talking pretty highly paid professionals. So the problem, though, is that if, for example, because look, if I look at the pricing that I have for my own company, it ranges. We've been increasing it a little bit now because of inflation, but let's say we're charging around the neighborhood of, let's say, 175 an hour to some of our SMEs. It could be that we're charging maybe 200, maybe even 225 for some of our large corporations and governments. Those kinds of rates are fairly normal, I would say, for pen testing for the industry. If I have a staff member who pulls down, let's say, 150 an hour, and I'm getting 175 from my customers. You can do the math that's not a very large margin. And on top of that, I've got a 5-person project management team. I've got a 5-person IT and infrastructure team. I'm also overhead. I'm basically our chief biz dev monkey, in the company. And as you can tell, that it makes it really hard. The problem, though, is that guy, like the one who would want to be charging me something like 150 an hour, he can probably pull down 200 or even 250 if he goes to work for a bank. And I tell him, look, I'm not a bank. If the government gave me permission to lend out money I don't have at 10 times leverage, then I can afford to pay better. But that's just not our business model, right? So the problem is that it's actually really difficult. And also some of these guys negotiate super hard, which basically, and they're good, like they're really, really good. And they'll basically say, you need to pay me like XYZ that look, I can't pay them what they're worth on the market sometimes. It's just what it is. But they'll be like, you have to pay me this certain amount or I'm going to leave. And they will find other customers, if they do. So at a certain point, if I want to keep my really senior staff members, I do need to pay them an amount that leaves me with not an incredibly huge margin. Then I do have some more junior people who are getting paid a bit less. So that enables me to actually have a margin, which is basically what we need to keep the company running. We used to have more pay inequity at the company. At a certain point, like the guy at India was earning considerably less, than some of the Western, guys in Western Europe. But that's also not fair, right? Because also the people in India, it might be cheaper there, but look, talent is talent. Wherever they're located. And to be quite frank, this guy can also pull down pretty good rates, because he's good. He wrote a book like on mobile app pen testing. He's an authority. So you can't get away, I think, even if people are in poorer areas with underpaying them. And in the last couple of years, really, I came out myself and said the pay inequity in the company bothers me. And it disrupted things when I said that. Because I think people somehow before, when I was keeping things secret, they all kind of had the illusion that everybody was sort of getting a bit underpaid. And as soon as I said that some people were getting paid, different than other people, all hell broke loose. Of course, why did I say this in the first place? Because I wanted to fix it. And, I've also seen examples of companies that have opened their books and, democratized compensation and tried to make a big collective agreement, about what everyone was getting paid and how to make that fair. And can you come up with some mathematical system for that? That's what I was hoping for when I started the discussion. And the problem is, as soon as you open that can of worms, when you ask everybody what percent they think they're worth, it always adds up to greater than 100, and the problem is the moment that people smell the tiniest piece of pay inequality, then people get really upset. And I spent the last 2 years giving out raises, basically bringing up those on the bottom end to the point that it started getting my company into cash flow trouble. And how could I not? Because basically at a certain point, people are like, yeah, and I go shopping at the supermarket and my coffee is a lot more expensive than it used to be. And it's like, yeah, they're right. It is, but of course that money needs to come from somewhere. And the problem also is that on our side as the company, we're locked into these framework contracts with our largest customers that usually, it could very well be another year or two before the next RFP period. Where we would have to go through the whole procurement circus again. And it means I can't even adjust my rates with my customers. We're basically locked into those lower rates for a period of time because, they're not up for negotiation at that time. And that's with the largest of our customers. The smaller customers, I can adjust it, but the smaller customers, I'm more reluctant to adjust it because they're, of course, also less able to afford it. So that makes it really hard, and at a certain point, I did bring up the lower end, but at a certain point, I kind of had to drop the issue and be a little bit less transparent about it again, because it basically left me with two choices. One, either I bring down the top end and then all of my best testers leave, or B, I basically try and bring up the bottom end even more and we go out of business.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you're bringing this up, because what I'm hearing from you is that the challenges within a post-growth business are very similar to the challenges within a growth business. in that a lot of the growth businesses aren't growing. They don't have the profit to donate to nonprofits. So trying to figure out how to, it's not growth for the shareholder's salary. It's trying to figure out how to even make ends meet, and what does that look like. And I see the comment in the chat, so appreciative of your transparency, Melanie. This is really relatable. And even just in the last handful of weeks, I was talking with an accounting coaching client of mine who was relating some of the challenges that she was having within her accounting firm. And one of her kind of right-hand people, her basically business manager, saying, hey, I'm getting offers from other businesses online, and I'm wanting to communicate this to you because I want to be upfront and transparent. And like, this business owner had a little bit of the like, why is she telling me this? Is she threatening to leave? What's going on? And it's like, let's take a step back and look at, the communication and the depth of relationship. If this were, say, a romantic relationship, this would be the equivalent of your partner coming to you and being like, so it would feel really, really weird and like I was hiding something not to say something to you. Some guy hit on me at the grocery store. I have no idea who he was, but just like putting it out there for all transparency's sake, nothing's wrong. And at the same time, it opens up that feeling of insecurity. And so before we were talking about these ideas around post-growth entrepreneurship being a bit of a paradigm shift for a lot of people, yet the core issues feel very much the same. And it sounds like the deeper paradigm shift around our personal value and how much we are worth, whether it be in general or per hour, and how to make an effective living so that we can afford the lifestyles that we want to be able to afford. That is the same across many businesses. And having worked in organizations that have the level of transparency that you're talking about around participatory budgeting, and what does it look like for everyone's pay rates to be completely open and disclosed, and to have a decentralized team model where all of those things are being discussed openly. And it takes a lot of vulnerability. So what you're expressing around the moment somebody smells pay inequity, suddenly there's a risk for challenging emotions to come up.
Yeah, and you need to deal with that, and it's not easy. And you have to remember, like, I've got a team of 50 people, which meant at a certain point I was probably having someone approach me at least once every 3 to 4 weeks asking for a raise. And I'm the person then also who they're talking to, and they're giving me their life stories and laying it on pretty thick. I mean, even emotionally for me, it's a very challenging conversation because I hate saying no. And yet I'm in the position where I actually have to protect the health of the company. And sometimes I do have to push back, in particular with the harder negotiators. Just because we're a social enterprise doesn't mean that there aren't some people who are looking to maximize, their personal situation. And I mean, there's a huge, another thing also was that I was pushing back very hard sometimes against those who were asking. And then I went actually to some of those who weren't asking and unsolicited gave them raises because they weren't asking, and it's just, but I had to because, it shouldn't just be those who are aggressive who are getting rewarded.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess so. The question that's percolating in my mind is getting back to that social enterprise piece, the culture that you are creating within Radically Open Security to create something together with this beautiful team of 50 people that is endeavoring to do something more in the world than just what you're getting paid by the hour for. What is the culture and the bigger values piece that keeps people engaged despite the pay differential for what they could be getting at a bank if they went elsewhere, if money was the only thing that was important to them? Clearly it's not, because they're staying with you. So tell us about your culture.
Yeah. So we've got our culture and our mission, and they're two different things. I think people stay. We've got a very interesting culture at Radically Open Security. And I also have to sort of preface this by saying it's also very specific to the industry that I'm in. So I'm in the IT industry, and I work with ethical hackers. A lot of them are also kind of open source, kind of fanatics. I work with a lot of sort of semi-anarchist. Another thing also is because I work with a lot of techies, we have an extremely high let's just say like autism level in my company, and in that sense, anyone who's ever been to a hacker space would know immediately what I'm talking about, like Noisebridge in San Francisco, or a similar kind of location. I work with a lot of very highly intelligent, mostly white men, mostly cis white men. I'm trying to hire for more diversity, but it's sometimes very hard to hire what's not there. And I'm saying this as a female who's worked on women in tech and women in cybersecurity initiatives, but it's a very long road to try and cultivate that diversity in the field. So basically, again, I've got mostly middle class cis white males, and all just a bit autistic. Some diagnosed, some maybe not. But what this means also is that they're super highly intelligent people. They have very strong opinions, and sometimes they have very little empathy. And to be fair, also I'm also a techie, so I'm also kind of the same kind. I mean, I'm not diagnosed, but I'm sure I'm also probably have traits, from somewhere on the spectrum too. So it's just a very particular kind of, hackers are really tricky cats to herd. In fact, when I say herding, like cat herding, it's that is loose, because the moment I tell them to do something, they will rebel because they don't respect authority. So this is super particular, like I said, I think to the field that I'm in and the kind of people that I work with. I think it would be totally different if you were running like a pizza restaurant or something. I'm sure you would get a completely different dynamic with your staff. But with the kinds of people that I work with, though, they're super allergic to a hierarchy or anything even smelling like authority. And they also tend to bike shed a lot and nerd snipe, and and sometimes communication is kind of a thing. So one of my PMs is also a nonviolent communications trainer. So we also work on that. So look, I'm telling you this because I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. Our culture at Radically Open Security is not perfect, and, there's the kinds of times also where we'll have discussions, and then like people will, sort of not very empathetically jump on other people. And then we have to like go in and like, sort of fix the things. And it's not the easiest place always, but everyone has a really good heart. And everyone is a really good person. And that's the thing. And where I think, though, the distinguisher is with Radically Open Security is really in our mission. Because first of all, the guys, they all know that we are giving our profits to charity. The fact that we have given 800K to NLNet makes them super proud. Yes, they need to get paid decently themselves. That's the cake, but the donations are kind of the cherry on the cake. They really like this. The other thing also is that we work on a not-for-profit basis. So basically, at cost price, zero margin for nonprofits, NGOs, and civil society organizations. So what this means is beyond, working for, Google and the European Commission, we also do work at cost price for Greenpeace, for Oxfam, for, privacy enhancing technologies like Tor or Tails or ShadowSox, or also just Mozilla Open Source Security Project. We do a lot of work for like core internet, Unix libraries and open source, and like the Dutch abortion boat. It's the kind of thing that we are the kind of company that can work for both a super big corporation and for Greenpeace. That makes us, I think, really unique. And I would say that the nonprofit sector probably is about roughly a third of our clientele. which means that actually we're able to deliver premium quality services to the governments and corporations to whom we charge the highest rates. And then basically we do it completely zero margin for an unlimited number of nonprofits, NGOs, and civil society organizations, basically any of them that approach us about it. So I think that's the other thing that my staff members really like, that they get to work with these kinds of actors, with these kinds of players. I mean, we work with these tiny, and tiny civil society organizations of Iranian refugees, that want to start some news site telling the truth about how it was, back in their country. And they literally have the world's scariest threat model. They've got a nation state after them, and they have almost no budget. They would be turned away from any other cybersecurity company. But we're, I mean, literally some of our commercial, competitors in the space, they send them to us because they know that we will help them. So, in that sense, I think that is something that also the guys, find really meaningful. And, that makes them want to stay. And, I think in the early days of the company, when pay was a bit lower, before I, had made things a bit more equal, we had a higher turnover rate. But since we have equalized the rates at least somewhat, I would say that our turnover rate has gone down considerably. And now we're a 10-year-old company, but we've got quite a few old timers, we've got people who've been around for 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, and these are freelancers. So, I mean, the fact that they actually stick around for this long is telling. So, they like it because it's an extremely highly intelligent, highly skilled group of people who can challenge them. For them, they do all have other customers. They're freelance, but over time they have a consistent group of colleagues that they can also socialize with, that they can ask for help when they're working on particular kinds of projects. And in a way, it's like for them combining the stability of almost kind of having a real job, even though it's not 40 hours a week and it's project based, but and then combining that with the flexibility that they can continue to work for the bank. If the bank comes to them and says, hey, I'm going to pay you 200 or 250 an hour for doing this 2-month contract with us, they can go leave, do that 2-month contract, and then come back, and they know that we're waiting for them when they come back. And that's kind of the way that we've made it work.
So I want to just close the loop on the last part of my question, because this is actually the perfect time to do that. And that is, how do you decide which causes or nonprofits to support? Is there a dialogue around that? Do you put the opportunity on the table and discuss it as I would love to know how that process occurs.
Right. When I first started the company, at the moment that I gave the company away for €1, that was when I made the executive decision that we were going to be supporting NLNet. I sort of felt entitled to make that decision, given the fact that I was the 100% equity holder who then gave away my equity to make the whole thing not for profit. So in that sense, I never put that up for discussion, just because, in that sense, I mean, I paid quite a steep price for our mission, and I would like to actually keep our mission stable. That's not to say that in the future it couldn't change, but that also begs the question really of once again governance, because you've got a couple issues with governance. The first is sort of the formal governance of your company, and the second is sort of more informal governance, aka management. And there's sort of two different things that need to be arranged there. In terms of formal governance, we're also this year, leading up to our 10-year anniversary, busy working with We Are Stewards and a couple steward ownership friendly lawyers to add the final element of steward ownership to our company, multiple golden shares. So I'm also adding this in place, also just to ensure that the company can never be sold. It's already written into our mission and statutes, but in theory, the board could still change it. That's why I'm putting the golden shares in there. So, and we're going to be executing on this in the upcoming 6 months, I think. And that's sort of the final element of steward ownership that we're embedding right now. I would have done it sooner, and the only reason I hadn't was because I was trying to figure out who to give the golden shares to, because that's actually not a very easy question to answer. But we're actually, I think, going to take what I'm calling the Oprah Winfrey approach to golden shares, which basically means rather than just giving it to one or two people, we're instead going to be like, and you get a golden share, and you get a golden share, and you get a golden share. Basically, just literally giving out as many golden shares as possible. Because as a computer scientist, I kind of consider this to be what we would call a Byzantine generals problem, in that you basically have a number of generals, and some of them can get subverted and be able to collude to cheat. So the question is, you need enough generals, and you need enough generals that cannot be subverted to ensure that in the end you can get the outcome that you want. So that's the reason why I'm taking that approach with the golden share. But because not very many companies have done it this way, we basically are kind of figuring it out as we go along. We're actually kind of building the airplane while we're flying it, because steward ownership as a concept is super new. And I mean, yes, we can sort of point at some historic examples like Bush and Zeist, and that have been around for longer, but they're mostly foundation owned. Foundation owned companies have been around for a while, but particularly in Scandinavia. But actual steward ownership as such, including golden shares, it's rather newer. And the thing is, if you ask a lawyer, how do I create a financially non-extractive company? The honest answer they'll give you nowadays is, I don't know. Because the thing is, trying to basically create any kind of legal structure that doesn't have loopholes, if you have a dedicated attacker, it's kind of like cybersecurity. In cybersecurity, there is no absolute security. It just doesn't exist. I mean, a dedicated attacker will always be able to find a loophole if they are motivated enough to find it. So what it is with cybersecurity is you typically have to give your system what we would call a penetration test. In other words, you try and hack it, you see where it breaks, you patch that, and then you iterate. And then basically you repeatedly attack it until you uncover basically the most obvious flaws. Then you patch those flaws, and then you keep, it's a cat and mouse game, and you just sort of, and you're never going to have perfect security, but what you will be able to do is gradually raise the bar until the cost benefit ratio of cheating becomes inconvenient enough that people stop trying. I'm sure as accountants, you can also appreciate that. And I believe it's the same also with governance structures and legal soundness. There's always going to be loopholes for these motivated attackers, but that's the reason why we need to innovate. We need to actually build something, try it, see where it breaks, and it will break in practice. It will break. It always breaks. But then we need to see where it breaks. Then we need to fix it. We need to iterate. And it's only by making hundreds, if not thousands of mistakes, that we're finally going to be able to come up with a structure that sort of becomes sound enough, sort of on a de facto basis, that it no longer becomes worth it for people to cheat. And then we can take whatever we've learned from doing that, and then we can make that sort of the basis for other things like steward ownership entity forms. Because first we need to figure out what we're doing. And that's research, but it's applied research. It's the kind of research that one cannot do in the academy, but that one can only do by building it, and making all the mistakes and gaining that knowledge, just, from the school of hard knocks.
I love what you're saying. It's so in alignment with the 5 pillars of regenerative accounting that we were just talking about in our playbook launch last week. And, as you're getting into humane governance, what are the governance structures within your organization? How do you measure them? How do you test them? How do we account for and hold each other accountable to the values that we want to maintain? And you've touched on the economic and financial pieces of it. You've touched on the well-being of your team members and what that looks like. You've touched on the justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, what we like to call the Jedi training skills. And one of the first things that you talked about was essentially extractive economies, and how do we develop businesses that are not extractive of our planet, exploitative of our peoples? Like, you've covered the gamut of everything that we're trying to teach here within the Accounting Alchemy Network. And in the handful of minutes that we have left, I guess the big question that I would love to toss by you at this point is, what big message would you like to share with the primarily accounting professionals, but also potentially other entrepreneurs who are watching the replay of this and are trying to figure out, where do they start in developing a bit of a post-growth business? Like, what is the first step to really developing a business that is values-based, where we can be accountable for and hold each other accountable for our values?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing really is just to dare to be different. I told you about that fiscal fundraising institution at the beginning, and I can tell you a funny anecdote. One time I actually spoke at a accountancy conference, and I was there with an entire room full of accountants. And the first question that I got in the QA period after it was over was, we really love your story. This all sounds really great, but why did you choose a business model, a fiscal construction that is best known for tax evasion? And it's spot on, because with this whole like church thing, and the business model, also anything with foundation ownership, spot on, right? Because I mean, truly a lot of other people have used things like foundation owned companies. Of course, billionaires love foundations, and in a lot of ways foundations are less accountable actually than businesses, because businesses have shareholders, whereas foundations only have a couple trustees with very little extra oversight. Same thing also with the FFI. A lot of people were using that to tax shelter things, but still, we need to. This is why we need what we would call sort of the legal belts and braces to put the non-extraction in there. Because without the non-extraction, then there's still going to be greenwashing. And you can eliminate the greenwashing from these vehicles by eliminating the financial extraction, and not reducing, but eliminating. If you reduce it, then you get the triple bottom line. But as Muhammad Yunus says, anytime people and planet come into conflict with profit, profit always wins. It's just a question of to what degree. But that's why you need to actually remove the profit, But professionals push back. Like also when I wanted to give away my company for €1, to a foundation, my notary said, "Are you sure? Do you really want to do this?" And the thing is, like, notaries and lawyers that are not used to these kinds of concepts, they will push back against you. And I was basically asking at one point my notary to put some things in the statutes, and he was just like, "Yeah, sorry, I can't do this for you. If I deviate too much from the way that things are done, like, it's not even legally going to be acceptable anymore." And at a certain point, I moved over and started working with different different notaries and different lawyers, some who specialized more in this. And that's the thing, because through nonprofit ventures, my incubator for post-growth and degrowth startups, they always ask the question, like, how do I do it? Right. And the thing is, we need professionals that they can go to where we don't have to explain it to them first. So we need lawyers, we need notaries, we need accountants and bookkeepers, who understand why in heaven's name you would ever want to give away your company for €1 or install, a golden share so you can't exit, because the majority of the universe doesn't understand it. But we need the professionals who do, and you need to be service providers to people like me, and people like us, because we need to build a community so we don't feel alone in this. And if we start gathering, if we find our community, then we will start moving the Overton window. We will start changing, redefining what is normal and what's acceptable. Yes, we're pushing on the extreme side of things, In that sense, I've tried to make things so social that it's almost a caricature of itself, And is it going to work in every situation? Probably not. I mean, most of the time, the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? But we know where the commercial side is. We know where that end is. We don't need to explore that end. But precisely by moving, that extreme, and how to build not-for-profit, non-extractive business, it moves where the middle is at. So, and that's why what we really need is pioneers, and it starts with finding that community, and it starts also with finding information. And in concluding, this webinar for you, what I can also do is say, an hour is not enough time to cover this, but I have I have released a series of videos, basically recordings from the post-growth entrepreneurship class that I started and teach at the in the business school at the University of Amsterdam. And I have put those videos up for free with an open source Creative Commons license. And it's available for anyone who wants to watch them, and it's 11 hours of content. So it's, a really long sit. I mean, if you just watch the first video one, you'll already get, I think, a pretty good idea of what it's about. But it's literally the entire class. So if anyone is looking for more specific information, I would say watch those post-growth entrepreneurship class videos. I'm sure maybe that Ingrid, that maybe you can give a link maybe in the show notes of
Yes,
this.
definitely.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, one last question before we actually officially wrap up. Melanie, what is the Unichicken? Because I was on your LinkedIn profile and I saw this thing. I was like, Ingrid, have you seen this Unichicken? And so I got to know, does it mean something? Did you come up with it? Give me the context for that.
Yeah. So the Unichicken is kind of a funny, cute design. You'll actually see it on the front, sort of the thumbnail for the PGE class videos. It's a combination between a unicorn and a chicken, and basically a chicken because we're basically comparing startups to factory farm chickens. In other words, you force feed them with investment capital so they can plump up and become juicy and attractive looking for 3 to 5 years, until the moment of their liquidation, of course, which is when the financial value is pulled out of that company, leaving a dysfunctional carcass of a company left over. So that's the chicken part. And basically the unicorn part is because, well, unicorns, of course, we all think that unicorns are our picture of success, right? 1 billion US dollar valuation or higher. However, unicorns have a dirty secret. 90% are cash bleeding and will never get out of it. And on top of that, nobody ever asks whose money are they spending. And if you then follow the money, you'll find out that 85% of contributions to US VC funds come from our pension funds, which basically means that when we work, is bleeding money, 5 times faster than it's getting it from customers that is coming out of our pensions. Most people don't realize that. And what a unicorn actually is, it sounds like a very fancy word, but it's actually a fancy word for pension fund subsidized monopoly forming.
Clear.
And we need to start. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for your time. We really, I mean, this is a great Lyceum, Ingrid, to kind of wrap up the last year and a half of just work we've been doing in terms of building community. And go ahead, Melanie.
Yeah, if I can make one final comment before we wrap this up, it's that next year, basically in 2024, I am going to be doing something that is called the PGE Post-Growth Entrepreneurship Roadshow. And this is on the occasion of the 10-year anniversary of Radically Open Security. I kind of felt like I'm in for a bit of a travel sabbatical, just to have a little bit of a change of scenery for a little while. So what I'm actually going to be doing is next year, I am going to attempt to bring post-growth entrepreneurship to as many business schools and startup incubators as possible. So what I actually am doing is I am looking for people who want to bring me to your hometown so I can go visit local business schools and incubators or other special interest groups and be able to essentially spread information about PGE, because already the post-growth entrepreneurship class is spreading. The Autonomous University of Barcelona is introducing a degrowth entrepreneurship module, which I'm going to be helping with to teach. So already that's the second university that's bringing in this class, and we need more. This needs to be in every business school. So please, I posted on my LinkedIn a link to the sign up form. So if anybody wants to bring me, just fill out that form. And I'm sure also Ingrid, perhaps you can share a link to that PGE Roadshow form to your
Absolutely. So
well.
exciting. Thank you.
Yeah, we will definitely do that. And so the last thing I'll say to wrap us up, and I think you made this point, Melanie, quite clear, is that one of the first steps that it takes to get to this kind of a world, right, is community building. And that's exactly what the Accounting Alchemy Network is here for. It's to bring together those people inside of the accounting industry who understand that change needs to occur, and then different conversations need to go on. And I love what you said, Melanie, about and I'm paraphrasing because I can't recall exactly how you said it, but that in essence, we need to not be afraid to be different. We need to be willing to put ourselves out there, be bold, take a risk or two or three, say something that hasn't been said before, ask the questions that are going to be uncomfortable. Your story about how you just brought up the pay inequity, and just even your willingness to bring that up, and not knowing what the answers are going to be coming back. That's the example that we need to see, because we need more people who are just willing to push the edge and have deeper conversations. So Melanie, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. I can't wait to get this YouTube video up for people to watch with all the links in there so that people can do their thing. And Ingrid, any final comments to wrap?
Dare to be different blew my mind. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This has been great. And thanks to everyone who joined us today live, and thanks to everyone watching the replay, and continue posting your questions and engage in this discussion on LinkedIn and Facebook. And feel free to reach out if you need to get a hold of Melanie. We'll post all of the links of how to find Melanie in the replay notes on YouTube. And thanks so much, Melanie. This has been great.
Thank you for inviting me.
Bye.
Bye-bye.